Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to talk about objectivism or objectivists and their relationship with rationalism. I think there's a big tendency in a lot of objectivists to lean to a more rationalistic side, a more rationalistic way of thinking. Rationalism basically just being accepting sort of mental constructs not tied to reality, accepting having these sort of mental constructs that are divorced from reality and thinking in terms of principles that have no connection to reality. Some common ways of doing this would be applying principles rationalistically, trying to fit the world into a box of these principles that you hold. Now, objectivism is true. That's something that I believe. I think most other people who look at reality honestly and understand objectivism would agree with me. However, you can't fit the world into objectivism. You can't try to look at the world and fit it into your sort of your ideas about objectivism, about the world. And this is a mistake that I think a lot of objectivists make. I know for sure that I did. So I'm going to try to talk a little bit about some of my past mistakes and go from there. So a lot of those mistakes that I would make was sort of trying to, well, I guess let's start with my background. As a religious person, I was very rationalistic, and I was a libertarian too. I was also very rationalistic in both of those realms, because as a libertarian, I would try to just start with these like abstract principles of like self-ownership and property, and then just like think about everything and just basically close my eyes and just go through these steps of mental processing to ultimately derive property rights and derive individual rights and derive how a proper government should act, or if there should be a government at all. So I would just basically close my eyes, introspect, and think from there. I wouldn't look at reality. I would make no reference to reality. I would just think about the ideas and just simply use logic without looking at reality. And this was a big problem. I think that it was the same thing when I was thinking about God. When I was trying to define God, I would just close my eyes and recite these rationalistic premises that seem true, but ultimately lead to these bad conclusions, so they're not necessarily true. And I think that's actually a problem with a lot of rationalistic thought. There's some things where if you're being rationalistic, you think something seems like it would make sense, seems like it would be nice if it were true, and then you just take that unclear idea and just run with it and run to all sorts of crazy conclusions by using that idea out of context, or using an idea that doesn't actually work in the way you think it does, or work at all, or adhere to reality at all. Like, I don't know, with some of the religious arguments for God, you're like, everything has to have a beginning. That's not true. What does that mean? Everything has to begin. Everything has to. That doesn't make any sense. That's a rationalistic premise that a lot of religious people use. But I definitely went through all of that. I was very rationalistic for a long time, and I still am. I still probably suffer from some rationalism, because a lot of times when I would think about objectivism, I would start with these premises. I would start with certain axioms and deduce everything from there, and just try to prove objectivism from the axioms. That doesn't work. You cannot prove objectivism from the axioms. That is how Descartes would think. That is how all these rationalistic thinkers in the past would think about philosophy. They would start with, like Descartes would start, cogito ergo sum, and then from there, everything would follow. That's basically what he would do. He would just say, everything follows from that. And that's not how you do philosophy. You need to look at reality. You can't just start with one premise and then deduce everything from there. You need to maintain a strict adherence to what you see in reality, to your sensory perception, because that's what you get. You get this interaction between your sense organs and reality. You can't disprove that. You have to take that, form concepts based on it, and make sure those concepts and your thoughts always adhere to reality. You need to basically induce every principle. You need to induce everything that you believe. You need to be able to see it in reality. You need to be able to see that it's real. You can't just have everything deduced from the axioms. And I think a lot of people make that mistake. I know that I made that mistake for sure. I would try to, like, for example, I tried to prove causality just from identity. You can't do that. You start with looking at reality, and you prove causality by looking at reality and seeing that things behave according to their nature. Just because something has a nature doesn't mean it behaves according to that nature. Now, obviously, that's implied. Those go together in reality. That is true. It's a true thing. Things behave according to their nature, and they have a nature. But you can't prove one using the other. You cannot. Yeah, that's not something that you can do. You can't prove these things deductively. You need to look at reality and discover them to be true. And I think we interact with a lot of rationalistic people on the internet because it's the internet. People are simply writing down words in a void. They're not connected to reality. They're connected to all these ideas that they're hearing on the internet, or all these ideas that they're throwing around in these comment sections, and they're just logically proving everything. And the fact, like, the whole idea of, like, arguing on the internet, you're trying to basically trap them in this argument that they can't disprove because it's deductively valid. No, you need to point at reality. That is the primary. You look at reality to prove the things that you want to believe. That's all you can do for a lot of things. You point to reality and say, free will, look at reality. Causality, look at reality. That's the key for all of these things. You can't just close your eyes and come up with all these premises and conclusions in your mind. That's not how logic works. You need to be tied to reality. You need to start with reality. Philosophy is not just a bunch of formulas that you plug in and do logic on and come to conclusions. No, it needs to always be connected to reality. And I think a lot of people have problems with that because it's very easy, especially early on when you don't have all the perceptual data, when you're young, basically, when you don't have all that perceptual data, to just accept these things as dogma and and hold them rationalistically, and then try to fit reality into these principles that you hold as dogma. That's something that religious people do. We're not religious people. We need to discover these principles through reality, through induction, through our own method of looking at reality, our sense perception. This is actually one issue that I have with how some objectivists talk about, accept objectivism as dogma, and then later talk about it, later argue with it, later interact with reality. No, that is the wrong way to think about it. You cannot accept these ideas as dogma because then you accept them rationalistically. You accept them out of context. You can't just take these ideas and just accept them and then look at reality. No, you look at reality and you accept the ideas from reality, from looking at reality, from interacting with other ideas, seeing how they relate with other ideas. You need to hold them in context. You need to put them in a hierarchy of knowledge along with everything else in reality. You can't close your eyes and just hear these ideas and accept them all and dismiss all the other ideas that you hear at the time. No, you need to form a integrated whole with the rest of reality, with all the other ideas about reality as well, seeing how they relate to objectivism. You cannot just accept these ideas as dogma, because what it does is it leads you to try to fit reality into your ideas. There is certain mistakes that I see with where people will try to basically fit different aspects of reality into objectivist dichotomies when they don't necessarily need to be that way, I guess. I don't know if I'm explaining this well, but I know like it's easy to just look at everybody in the world and try to fit them into the way that they act, into this mind-body dichotomy that we see, like, oh, this person's behaving like this, they're a body person, or this person's behaving like this, they're a mind person, and just sort of rationalistically categorize people like that. It's okay to do. You can see trends like that in the culture, but you can't rationalistically categorize people as empiricists or rationalists just based on their actions. Sure, maybe someone has those type of tendencies, maybe someone behaves in that way, but they're still individuals. You can't rationalistically categorize them like that. That's one mistake that I sort of see. I'm trying to think of other examples, and I don't know. But I think sometimes, like, when I was talking with Existence University, this is something that I did wrong, not him. One of my initial thoughts was when he was talking about how, like, this wave particle dichotomy doesn't make sense. And then my initial thought was like, what if there's an underlying substance? And then I threw that out, and I immediately was like, oh wait, no, that's rationalist. That's rationalism. You feel like, because it's like, like particles can behave like waves sometimes, and waves can behave like particles sometimes. So maybe there's an underlying substance that unites them both. No, that's rationalism. Look at reality first. Don't think about what might feel right. You can't come to conclusions by whim. You can't use your whim to come to these conclusions. You need to always be strict in your adherence to reality with these philosophical issues. Philosophy is tough. It's not something that you can just do in your mind, where you just close your eyes, sit in your room, and just think hard enough and just feel what seems right. No, you look at reality. You need to be scrupulous with your looking at reality and keeping your principles in line with reality. And never, ever drop context. So yeah, I think that is all I have to say for today. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Peace.